I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern14.com, here to do SEC Baseball Power Rankings as we head into this weekend's action. This weekend will start the 8th weekend of conference play, and games will begin on Thursday night. Let's start from the bottom, where there are three teams I've grouped together: Kentucky, Missouri, and South Carolina. I'm going Kentucky 14, Missouri 13, South Carolina 12. Carolina, by virtue of having won 9 games, kind of leapfrogs the other two. I'm still not convinced that Carolina is the best of those three teams. They have kind of been in that same group all year. There's a lot of sort of weird things going on with Carolina, but certainly you also have to mention that had Julian Bosnick been healthy, that's a different team, but you play the cards you're dealt. Another team with pitching injuries has been Kentucky. I think Nick Mingione has done a tremendous job of stringing together arms at key times on weekends, because that pitching has been depleted with the injuries to Darren Williams and to Cole Stupp. So, tough year for two of those teams, and Missouri has actually gotten better, although the schedule has been in the league brutal. But Missouri did win 2 out of 3 last weekend against Mississippi State. I think that says something about how much they have improved. Okay, we get to 11 and 10. I've got Ole Miss at 11 and Mississippi State at 10. You could argue either way. When these teams played a couple of weekends ago, State won 2 out of 3. State also now has won 9 games in the league, and Ole Miss has won 7. Now, they did play a midweek game that also did not count towards the league standings, which Ole Miss won. I think Ole Miss, statistically, probably the better team, but State, by virtue of winning 9, goes in that 10 spot, while Ole Miss gets 7. Ole Miss, the computers have as a better team in the RPI and everything else, but at some point, wins and losses matter. I've got Alabama standing as the 9 team. That was one of the easier ones to slot, although I guess you could put Florida there instead. I'll get into the Gators in just a minute. Alabama now has lost 3 weekend series in a row after sweeping at Ole Miss a couple of weekends ago. I just think lack of really good hitting is catching up with Alabama. And the pitching depth, actually, Alabama's starting pitching, I think, has been better than people have thought. But I'm just not sure talent-wise that Alabama is on par with some of the teams in front of them, although Alabama certainly controls its own destiny with series with LSU at Auburn and Arkansas coming up. So if Alabama were to play well, it can certainly get itself into the NCAA tournament. At 8, I've got Florida. And Florida is 8 and 13. I've actually got the Gators ranked ahead of 3 teams that have won more games in the league than Florida has. But the computers like Florida. The strength of schedule has been good. Florida's been decent in the midweek and thrown together some good out-of-conference wins. Florida also has played a brutal schedule. At Alabama, LSU, at Georgia, Arkansas, at Vandy, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Last weekend, probably, depending on what you think of Alabama, the first time Florida had not played a team that's headed to the NCAA tournament, and it won that. Florida's schedule gets a lot easier at Mississippi State, at Missouri, and South Carolina at home. Though having said that, Florida's not been really good on the road the last few years, so we'll see where that settles. Okay, coming up at 7 and 6, probably the most 2 confusing teams in the league. Because Vanderbilt is at 7. Vanderbilt is 10 and 11 in the league. It is plus 28 in runs in the league. Now, I know sometimes blowouts factor that in. Vanderbilt had a 19-run game against Auburn. And Georgia at 6 has had the reverse. It had that 23-run game. It gave up that many to A&M. I know sometimes the pitching staff can throw in the white flag, and it gets ugly. But minus 25, goodness gracious, that's what Georgia's run differential is in the league. I do think that matters somewhat. Georgia's got the worst ERA in the league in terms of conference ERA. It's been sort of Jonathan Cannon and Jack Gowan and hold your breath otherwise, because the bullpen's not been good. The Georgia's had some injuries too. But 2 teams this weekend that, if you look at the runs scored and runs given up, you would think Vanderbilt was the team that was 13 and 8 maybe, and Georgia you would think would be more like 9 and 12. But Georgia's got a 2-game lead on Vanderbilt in the wins column heading into their series in Athens. Again, 2 teams with very mixed signals. Now, Vanderbilt just has had a lot of trouble scoring against good pitching, and I think that explains it somewhat. It is battered bad pitchers at times, and a lot of teams do that. It's hardly just Vanderbilt, but I think that explains a little bit of the disconnect there. Now, Georgia has gotten a little healthier on the mound, and we'll see if Georgia pitches better going forward, but those are two teams that statistically are just very opposites. The underlining things would make you think that Vanderbilt is better than it is, and Georgia is probably a little worse than it is. But wins and losses matter, and so we've got Georgia ahead of Vandy. And frankly, I've got some concerns about Vanderbilt. It's got to start hitting from the bottom of the order. At 5, I've got Auburn. You could argue Auburn as high as 3. I just think in looking at run differential, Auburn's still minus 21 in the league. Really good team. I think their pitching depth falls off after 4 or 5 guys. That's the case for a lot of teams. But Auburn's got some pitching injuries. Auburn has got coming up Arkansas, Alabama at home, both those, and then at Kentucky. Auburn very much in position to host a regional if it takes care of business. But there's some mixed signals in Auburn's record and now some pitching injuries that could factor too. LSU at 4. I've said this for a while. I think LSU is a better team than people think. LSU is actually, goodness gracious, I think 4th or 5th in the league in terms of fewest runs given up in league play. It is actually 4th. I don't think most people think that. When you think of LSU, you think of that offense and that lineup, and you should. But I think that LSU actually has pitched better than people think. It's got a pretty good bullpen with Paul Gervais, Eric Raiselman, Riley Cooper, some guys like that get big outs for them. And the hitting, I think, is always going to be there for those guys. That is an elite hitting team that's even been a little bit banged up there. So I feel comfortable having LSU at 4. I don't think I'd feel comfortable moving the Tigers any lower. At 3, I've got Texas A&M. And A&M has been a confusing bunch this year to figure out. Was not very good against a weak out-of-conference slate, but sometimes teams figure it out and start to gel as you get into conference, and that looks like the case for A&M right now. It is plus 30 in runs in league games. That ranks them 3rd. 12-9 ranks A&M in a 3-way tie in conference play in terms of win-loss record. I saw A&M last weekend. That lineup is just so big and physical up and down the order. Micah Dallas has been kind of a disappointment in the weekend rotation. But Joseph Menifee was really good for them last week in the Saturday game, Game 3. He should pitch better than he has. If he comes through, look out, because Jacob Palish has been really good in relief. And Nathan Detmer's been one of the league's best starters. I like A&M because I think that team is really tough to pitch through all the way down the order. Dylan Rock has gotten a lot of attention for a good year. But that is a huge team, and they can really mash. And I think A&M is playing really good ball. And to me, looks like a team that I kind of throw the 27-15 record out a little bit because I think they're better than that, and it has started to come together with them. Arkansas, easy decision, is number 2. Arkansas has only given up 80 runs in league play. Now, the schedule for Arkansas has not been super challenging, and they played Kentucky, Missouri, Mississippi State, Florida, Ole Miss. Really, A&M and LSU are only the 2 of the top half of the league teams they played. But Arkansas is a good team. 3 really good starters on the weekend, good bullpen. The lineup, I think, can hit better than it has. Despite the warts, despite the schedule, Arkansas is still in the 20s in RPI because of what the computer perceives as a weak schedule. But I look at how this team is constructed, and it's hard to rank Arkansas anywhere other than number 2 right now. Of course, 1, Tennessee. Not a lot of drama with that one. The Vols, while the attention has been on the hitting, look at the pitching, guys. Tennessee, and this isn't ERA, this is just runs. Tennessee's only giving up about 2.8 runs per 9 innings in SEC games. That's phenomenal. They're outscoring teams by almost 5 runs a game in the league. That's crazy good. You just don't see that level of domination. While people have talked about Tennessee's hitting and it's outstanding, I just look at their pitching. And they've done it with Chase Dollander being hurt the last few weekends. I think they hope to get him back. Blade Tidwell has been out all year. He's not pitched great when he's been back, but he could be a factor. Drew Beam's been really good for them. Maybe the pitcher of the year in the SEC to this point. Chase Burns has been good, and their bullpen is hands down the best in the league. So not any drama with ranking Tennessee number 1, but I just wanted to point out that their pitching has been better than everybody's thought. While all the talk has been about the bats, I think their pitching has actually been more dominant than the hitting has been. In fact, I'm going to pull this up. In league play, Tennessee is giving up .92 runners per inning pitched. This is in SEC-only games. It's giving up free passes 7% of the time. It's striking out teams at 29%. Those 3 marks are the best 3 in the league. In fact, the base runners is the thing that catches my attention. Next best team when it comes to base runner prevention in the SEC, that's Arkansas, all the way down at 1.39. Against that's the second best team. The average in the league is about 1.59 for giving up base runners per 9 innings. Tennessee is a good, 0.67 below that. That's crazy. That means per 9 innings, Tennessee is giving up 6 base runners per game in SEC games, less than the average team. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that, the dominance that they are exhibiting on the mound. Anyway, we'll have player rankings coming up. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and we'll see you again soon.